Fire Emblem, the Binding Blade, FE6, the one that's got Roy in it. He's our boy. Jacob's also our boy. He's right here.
I think we should probably have something going in before we try to talk about this, since there's a real lot to discuss with how this codified the series.
I mean, not only do we have to discuss that, we also kind of have to go into Maiden of Darkness a little bit.
Boy, yeah. This, there's a lot to unpack.
FE6 is a really important Fire Emblem game.
There's a lot to actually unpack with everything that led up to the creation of Binding Blade.
There is, but I think that we should start with the game itself and then go into the ancillary stuff around it.
What part of the game itself? We're talking about story?
Yeah, let's just start with the basic story. Who is Roy? What is a burn? It was the first game on the Gameboy Advance, also the first Fire Emblem game on a handheld console.
Yeah, it was the first Fire Emblem game on a handheld console. They kind of skipped the N64 entirely in the console. They also never got around to making a game for the original Game Boy. Kind of went straight from SNES to Game Boy Advance. This is the first game to not have a direct connection to Arcanea, but the prequel to this game does give it a heavily implied indirect connection to Arcanea, which we'll get into in that game's video.
Yeah, that's fair. There's a lot of connection there, and not quite as much here. But what this game does have is also a lot fewer dragons than other Fire Emblem games. Although not the least number of dragons. That's coming up.
Binding Blade still has a playable moniker.
Yes, it does, and that would be Faye, and she is adorable.
Yeah, a lot of the characters in Binding Blade are actually direct parallels to Arcaneans, though. Particularly early from Book 2, but there's quite a few Book 1 parallels as well.
Yeah, you sent me that picture the other day in some chat or other that we're in.
And... Yeah, someone made a list of every character in Binding Blade and who they parallel in the Marth remakes. Some of them were retroactive because of the DS remakes. Some of them were already existing from FE3.
You guys should totally go look those up. They're pretty cool.
I didn't. The thing is, that thing has been buried. The image has been buried. I've been looking for it for years now at this point to find it again.
Yeah, and you only just found the one.
Yeah,
just the other day.
The one just the other day. Binding Blade is basically sort of like The Force Awakens, but for FE3 Book 2.
The spiritual successor, kind of?
Yeah, it's like a spiritual retelling, essentially.
Yeah, and you can definitely see a lot of the parallels between Spoiler Guy from Mystery of the Emblem with Zephiel. If you played the game, you know exactly who I'm talking about. Or maybe if you played Heroes.
Yeah, Exakes, or however you pronounce it, even starts out as a lance before it morphs into a sword.
But let's move over to discussing the story itself then. So we show up on Elebe, an entirely new continent made up of a couple of countries.
I'm pretty sure it's a leap.
I'm going to call it Elebe anyways.
And I'm going to call it a leap anyways. I'm just basing this
I'm pretty sure it is pronounced in Heroes, but I'm not going to go check, just in case I'm wrong.
I'm pretty sure they do pronounce it as a Leeb, and the Japanese name looks like Arib, so that's why I go with a Leeb. But anyways, you do your thing, I'll do mine.
Yeah, whatever. It doesn't really matter all that much.
Yeah.
So, the major countries are... there's Etruria, which is the center of religion.
Okay, so first I think we should get up to the basis of the story.
I guess the backstory.
Yeah, the basis of Binding Blade that they establish in the opening cutscene and the intro is that 1,000 years prior to the game, to the year, exactly 1,000 years prior to the game, there was a great war between dragons and humans. This gets simultaneously more and less detail in the prequel. It's actually kind of a really well-designed prequel in that regard. But anyways, this war ended up becoming known as the Scouring, and what happened is that the humans went and essentially exterminated the dragons entirely.
Just gone.
There were 8 legendary generals who led the human army. I think
they're referred to as the 8 Legends.
Yeah, I think they're called the 8 Legends. Yeah, the 8 Legends. And each of them had a divine weapon. Each of the 8 Legends, except for Athos and Bramamond, I believe, went on to found a country of their own.
Yes.
And you want to go over which country they founded?
Yes. So there it was, first of all, Saint Elamine, the monk, or...
She was a bishop.
Okay, she was a bishop. Oh, yeah, because Saint Elamine was a chick. That's right.
Yeah, she was a bishop.
Yeah, so she went on to found the country of Etruria, which became pretty much like the cultural and religious center of Elebe.
Yeah, she also had a light magic tome and a staff, which is pretty much indicative of being a bishop in this game.
Yep. There was Hannon, who was a horseman, or horsewoman in this case. FE7 tries to say that Hannon was a dude,
it's just
but
only a
FE6
love
is... Yeah. But FE6 is pretty clear that Hannon is female.
Yeah, she was
went on to found
trooper that used a sacred bow.
Yep. And she went on to found the country of... I just had the name in my head. Why can't I remember the name? Sakai, thank you. Yes, the country of Sakai, which is full of nomadic horse people. And also a lot of people that are good with swords.
Yeah, Myrmidons. FE4 kind of started the trend of Myrmidons being from a specific country. In Jugdrill's case, they were from Isaac. In this game, Myrmidons are exclusively from Sakai, or people who have been trained in the ways of Sakai. And also in this game, nomads and nomadic troopers are exclusive to Sakai. They're basically the parallel to the bow knights in earlier games. Mounted archers with sword axes.
Yeah. So, there was also Beragon, who we don't really know much about. I think he was a knight.
Beragon was a paladin?
All I know is that his, epithet was the knights. I
think he's shown the paladin in the portrait for FE7 with all the heroes.
I've got it up right here. Yeah, he's definitely on a horse. So,
yes, that'll be a
paladin. Let's go with that.
Yeah, paladin.
So he had the Lance Maltet, and he went on to found Ilia up in the frozen north, which became a country full of mercenaries. And something else we see a lot of in Fire Emblem.
Yeah, Ilia's most notable thing is that's where most of the Pegasus Knights in this game come from.
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed. So then there was Hart Moot, who was kind of...
He was the leader.
One of the leaders. Yeah, he was the leader. He wielded two weapons.
Well, that's kind of a spoiler.
Oh, is it?
It's kind of a spoiler, but you already said it.
Yeah, but I can cut it out.
Yeah, kind of a spoiler. But yeah. Hartman's in a weird situation because his class can be anything from mercenary to...
Yeah, as long as it's an infantry sword user, it could be him.
Yeah, I think the intention is that he's supposed to be a lord or a king.
Yeah, I'd imagine king, because that kind of draws a connection to Zephiel.
Yeah, but also lord, because his whole thing is that he's actually more similar to Roy than Zephiel.
I mean, yeah. But, anyways, so yeah. Hart Moot, who wielded the sword Exox. And he founded Bern, which is where a lot of the Wyvern riders come from in this continuity, and it is probably the most... Not even probably. It is definitely the most militarily powerful of the countries.
Because Hart Moot was the leader, Bern is considered the ruling nation of this continent of Elite, essentially. It has the same role that Arcanea did in Arcanea.
Yeah. And then the last country worth... Well, not the last country worth mentioning. There was... I guess I forgot that Durban kind of settled in the Western Isles.
Yeah,
but it's not
Durban
really a country of its own.
Western Isles, and it's kind of a country.
It's more like an extension of Etruria by the time we get to FE6.
Yeah, Durban is interesting because Durban's weapon, Armads. Durban was the Berserker, I believe?
Yes, that is correct.
And Durban's weapon, which is the axe Armads, essentially kind of drove him insane. So that might be why he didn't explicitly found a nation.
No, he just went off and founded the Western Isles, which are where most of the... there's a lot of pirates there, there's a lot of brigands there.
The Western Isles don't necessarily have a unified government, as much as they're kind of this group of settlements, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. And then the last one who founded a country was Roland, who founded Lycia, which for those of you who played Three Houses, that's a lot like Leicester, the Leicester Alliance, where it's just mostly, instead of having really one unified government, it's a bunch of small unified kingdoms that work together to keep themselves independent.
Based on the graphic, Roland was a sword infantry, right?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. I think
Probably
the
a
game
hero
explicitly
is,
calls
I
him a
think,
hero.
what we're... Yeah, I think that's what we're going with. And anyways, he wielded the Blazing Blade Durandal, which will become important
It's
in another
Durandal.
game. Pronunciation.
Yeah.
And then there were two more that didn't found countries. They just kind of went off on their own. Those were Bramamond.
Bramamond vanished. No one knows what happened to Bramamond. This isn't actually addressed in Binding Blade itself, but it does get addressed in the prequel. And then Athos disappeared into the Nevada desert.
Yeah.
Also discussed
and then,
in the prequel. But it's
yeah,
also
they both
discussed in
had
this
tomes.
game, too.
Bramamond was a dark mage or a sorcerer.
I believe he was a
a druid. That's the term.
Mm-hmm.
And he had the tome Apocalypse, and then Athos had Forblaze, which was a fire tome.
Mm-hmm. Athos was a sage.
Yes,
and eventually
and that
he does
is
become an archmage.
The only one we flat out. Yeah, he's the only one we flat out see. But once again, not in this game.
Yeah, in this game, they don't really pick up what happened to Bramamond, and in Binding Blade, Bramamond is this sort of figure.
Like, I will say that the 8 heroes definitely existed in the backstory of FE6, but they were far more important in Blazing Blade.
I think they're kind of important in both games. It's just certain heroes.
I guess, yeah, that's true.
Certain heroes like Hart Moot.
Like Hart Moot was very important for Binding Blade.
Hart Moot is way more important in Binding Blade than he is in Blazing Blade, for example.
Yeah, and I guess St. Elamine is as well, just due to how much more we see of the church in this game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Athos is kind of important in both games.
Yeah, then if we go to FE7, then Hanan was more important. Roland was semi-important in FE6, but far more important in FE7. And then both Bramamond and Durban are pretty much FE7.
Yeah, Bramamond and Durban are pretty much FE7.
And then there's Beragon, who I can never actually remember the name of. And I only remember the name of because I have the wiki page up.
Beragon's like irrelevant in both games.
Yes. Let's move on from there. So that's pretty much what Elebe is. And then we have Roy, who is the descendant
Prince
of
Roland.
Roland.
One of the lesser marquis of Lycia.
Of Foray.
Yeah, Foray is split into multiple provinces, was it?
Yep. I don't think they're called provinces.
Yeah, what are they called? That's what I'm looking for.
Are they just called territories?
They might be. So
it's led by House Ostia, which is ruled by the great patriarch Hector.
Mm-hmm. And his daughter is Lilina.
Yes.
And
she is adorable.
And Roy is the son of one of the lesser ruling lords of one of the lesser territories. So technically this does make Roy the Prince of Foray, I believe it is.
Yep. Mm-hmm. The one thing that Foray does have going for it is that its Marquess Eliwood is like best friends with Hector.
Yeah, so Marquess, nepotism and all that.
Yeah.
So otherwise it's one of the lesser territories, while Ostia is the ruling territory. Should we discuss what happens to Hector since it happens pretty early in the game, or?
I think that it's really important that we discuss it. So pretty much,
okay, yeah, but,
Lycia is suddenly attacked. Yeah, I think that we can say it just fine because it's only in chapter 6.
I believe it's chapter 3, actually.
Actually, you may be right. Yeah. Anyways, so suddenly Lycia is attacked by the Burn army. We don't really know why, but Hector, who's pretty much the de facto leader of all of Lycia, is killed. And everything just kind of falls to hell.
Yeah, everything in Lycia goes into chaos until the Forayan army ends up regaining control from Burn. And this, what ends up happening is because of his connection to Hector, Eliwood ends up becoming the de facto leader of Lycia. And this also, by extension, makes Roy the general of Foray's armies because Eliwood himself is too ill to fight on the front lines. And this is kind of why Roy is so significant throughout the game, because he ends up being the general of the Lycian army. This is sort of similar to how in FE3 Book 1 and Shadow Dragon, Nina was technically the ruler of Arcanea, but Marth was the general and leader of the Arcanian Alliance. Not the Arcanian Alliance, the Arcanian League.
And so the game follows Roy as he tries to pretty much fend off Byrne's army and keep them from conquering the entire continent. And there's a lot of other stuff that goes on.
Mm-hmm.
That's very spoilery.
Yeah, this game, you actually, later in the game, you get to choose between going to Ilia or Sake.
But pretty much you get to explore the entire continent in this game.
Which you don't do in FE7, which is the prequel. Although in FE7,
Yeah.
certain countries get a bit more fleshed out, like Sake in the prequel.
What do you generally think of this story?
Honestly, it's been a while since I've played this game, but I actually did at some point like this story more than FE7. This game has a really strong story to start off with. To start off the sort of era without Kaga, as it were, and also the whenever they defined Fire Emblem. The one thing I don't like about this game, but I also kind of do like, is how most of the lore of this game is kind of hidden from you until literally the last, 3 chapters of this game.
Yeah, and that's actually really important, because the last 3 chapters, you might not actually end up going to, depending on how you did with the rest of the game.
Yeah, it's kind of like...
this is a situation, once again, similar to, Mystery of the Emblem.
Yeah, Mystery
where if you don't go through all the extra background stuff, in FE12 you have to go through all the paralogs, and FE3... I don't know.
In FE3, it was tied to
FE3.
getting all of the orbs, which is just one of the 2 requirements in FE12.
Yeah. And then, if you don't do that, then as soon as you beat Zephiel, you get the bad ending. But if you're able to go through all the paralogs, you collect all of the sacred relics, you actually have a chance to go through to the true ending, where you see what's been going on behind Zephiel the entire time.
Yeah, and most of the lore in this game is kind of locked behind those last few chapters that you can miss if you don't get all the divine weapons. I believe there's 7 of them to collect via paralogs because you get the binding blade automatically.
That sounds right. Right, and then, I guess that you get to choose between either collecting Maltet or Mulagir through the paralogs.
Yeah, and then, what's his name comes with the other one?
Yodel?
Yeah, Yoder. Yeah, Yoder
Yodel.
comes with the one you don't collect.
He's the Fire Emblem character with the most inconsistent idea of what his name might be.
Yeah.
But he's the Pope. You get to fight alongside the Pope. It's great.
I like a lot of what this game's concepts do with regards to Zephiel. I think Zephiel might be one of the best, top 5 Fire Emblem antagonists, honestly.
Oh yeah, for sure. Especially when you go through, you see what he was in FE7.
I know this is going to surprise a lot
what
of
happened
people,
in between.
But I do think Leaf from Three Houses, who is essentially the main antagonist of Book 3, because the game kind of loses focus on Hell. I think Leaf is probably one of the only characters that's better than Zephiel in terms of being an antagonist. And Leaf has a lot going for him that's really spoilery that he kind of gets to cheat with.
Yeah. Well, one thing I will say that FE6 kind of suffered from, at least for me, was the writing in the fan translation.
Mm.
The fan translation's not terrible, but it's kind of dry.
Yeah, I could see that being an issue.
And especially compared to FE7, which I still think was written very well.
I probably should do a top 5 Fire Emblem antagonist at some point. I just know
You
that
totally
Leaf and
could.
Zephiel would be up there.
They'd both be fair choices.
So, yeah. Also think what this story does with Roy is also kind of really strong. Although a lot of this game's story is kind of supported by the fact that FE7...
Yeah, very much. And FE7 definitely tells a lot about this game, and I do think that generally it is the better game. The other thing FE6 kind of has that holds it back for me is it is probably the hardest Fire Emblem game I've played at normal difficulty.
Yeah, that could be... Yeah, so far, that's probably true. I would say it's still probably easier than the Jugdral games.
But I haven't played Jugdral, so FE6.
And also, if you count Apotheosis from Awakening, it's definitely more difficult.
Let's not count Apotheosis.
I will definitely count Apotheosis.
Apotheosis is its own thing.
Yeah, well, a lot of what they do with Zephiel, but not just Zephiel, also incorporate his ideas into the story and how Roy has to essentially be a counterpoint to all of his ideas, and how they a lot of the minor antagonists in these games, not the minor antagonists, the minor major antagonists, you know what I'm talking about, like Darren in the sort of the more important minor antagonists. A lot of them play into Zephiel's ideology in a very interesting way. Like Narcian is the biggest example of this.
Yeah, and another thing I will say in praise of Zephiel is that while the writing surrounding him, at least in the English, isn't necessarily the best, you really can see where he comes from. Unlike a lot of characters where you see that they're just like super nihilistic, there's not really a reason for it. But then you compare him in FE7 as like an idealistic teenager to FE6 where he is literally not even that person anymore at all. You can, as he slowly pieced together what happened in his life in between those times, you can really see what led to his downfall.
Yeah, and the thing about that is that he doesn't necessarily come from nowhere either, because a lot of the antagonists play into his ideology and his beliefs.
He very much is a product of the world that spawned him.
Yeah, there's like this there's this entire storyline in Etruria where there's essentially a traitor to the throne who ends up working for Zephiel, who essentially assassinated the prince and tries to assassinate the king, I believe. Then there's Narcian from Burn, who kind of also helps to Zephiel's ideology, and sort of, I affectionately refer to Narcian as Zephiel's thesis.
Narcian is just literally the worst person.
Yeah, Narcian is a really good. He's not a well-written antagonist, but he's a well-written hate sink, I would say. He's a very good character, and seeing Narcian's another one of this game's strengths. Seeing Narcian go from this essentially pedophile at the start of the game to who is completely in control of the situation around him, to someone who is having a literal mental breakdown and rambling incoherently in his quote because he cannot even comprehend getting that far. It's actually really satisfying in this game.
Let's see. I am not seeing an age for Clarion, so
he's a rapist at best, though.
Oh yeah, at the very best. And like, there's no way that Clarion is 18. Like, I'd put her maybe 14.
Yeah, she's not that old at all. What else can we go into with this story?
Oh yeah, so going back to the story, I don't really want to cover what happens those last 3 chapters.
You do or do not?
I do not.
Yeah, those last 3 chapters are kind of what will change your opinion drastically on this story, I feel like. Because YM wasn't really a fan of this game, but then he did the last 3 chapters, and he ended up really liking the game as a result. This game as a whole is interesting because the very last bit of it can completely change your opinion.
Yeah, like, this is the Fire Emblem game I played that I think most deserves a remake at this point. That I've played, Jacob.
Okay, yeah.
But I feel like having an official localization and having gameplay more, like, refined, similar to what we've had with Echoes and Three Houses, would do this game
At
wonders.
some point, I think this does need a remake, but not a actual guess one. Should we go into the actual gameplay itself and, like, the whole...
Yes, let's do that. This is the earliest game that is very easily recognizable as Fire Emblem, I'd say.
Yeah,
it's got the weapon triangle, it's got support conversations.
This game introduced a lot of things that are essentially inseparable from Fire Emblem. Like, even the remakes incorporate a lot of the things that Binding Blade introduced.
Yeah, affinities were introduced in this game.
That's only relevant in GBA and Telus, though.
I mean, yeah, but at the same time, it's still worth noting.
Yeah, this game introduced a lot of things that essentially are iconic to Fire Emblem's identity, to the point that you're basically... You can't really have Fire Emblem without a lot of these concepts. They're so deeply ingrained in Fire Emblem that even the remakes of the first 3 games incorporated most or all of the stuff introduced in Binding Blade. For example, and even in the class system, this was the first game to have a clearly defined split between mages promoting to sages, healers promoting to bishops, and dark mages and sorcerers are their own, essentially. This was the first game to have a very clear distinction between the 3 magic types.
I kind of said it earlier, but this is the first game to have real support conversations.
I was not finished with classes, thank you.
Okay, fine. You can continue with your classes. It sounded like you were done.
No, I was done with the magic classes. There's things like pirates promoting into berserkers, brigands promoting into berserkers, I think was a thing in FE5, but I can't be too sure. Another big thing, this carried over the mercenaries promoting into heroes who use axes thing from Thracia and kind of made it a serious staple from this point. Also, it solidified Myrmidons promoting into sword masters as like a definite thing. Kind of, we had sword masters in their sort of play style already in FE4 and 5, but in FE4 and 5, Myrmidons could promote into either heroes or sword masters essentially. This basically introduced a lot of the concept of classes in particular and kind of solidified the class structure to what is typical of Fire Emblem, essentially.
Yeah, like if you looked at the classes in, say, Genealogy, you'd see your Free Knight and your Sword Fighter and your Thief Fighter, which I know it has another name, but everybody keeps calling it the Thief Fighter.
Rogue.
Yeah, Rogue, thank you. But if you look at FE6, you'll recognize just about every class. But yeah, for the most part, that's very recognizable.
Then we get into the big thing that this game sort of introduced, which is...
Now can we talk about supports?
Yeah, support conversations.
Okay. This isn't the first game necessarily to have something similar. FE3 had something that was close to a support system. FE4 had its love system, but FE6 really had the first support system that we recognize it as today, with its 3-tiered system, with the
CBA.
first paired endings.
Yeah, and it had FE6 has paired endings as well. Goes from
although only with Roy.
Oh, only with Roy. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Supports that go from CBA. I guess paired endings for everyone started with FE7.
Yes.
Supports that go from CBA. There was a support log, I believe, in this game.
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah, so you could log supports. Supports giving bonuses that increase as you go up. All supports having conversations instead of the love system and FE3 system where only certain supports had conversations or none at all, or like the weird love conversation system. This introduced support conversations, and support conversations are kind of the inseparable from Fire Emblem's identity going forward in this game, to the extent that 2 of the 3 remakes so far have already added supports. All the mechanics of this game are essentially what would become typical for Fire Emblem for more or less going forward from here.
This is the earliest game that is clearly recognizable as a quote-unquote modern Fire Emblem.
Yeah, this doesn't have the weird stuff like Genealogy's big open maps, or I guess the 2-gen systems kind of come back in later games, but doesn't really have a lot of Thracia's weirdness, and it doesn't have the fucking pure-ass jank that the first 3 games have. A lot of this...
Oh, we're going to be getting so much hate for that.
No one is going to sit here and tell me that FE1 is not jank. Alright? No one.
No, but they'll tell you that FE3 is not.
Oh boy, yeah. FE3 is the least jank of the 3, I will admit that, but it's still dismount. No dismounting. Don't hit me with the dismount.
There is no dismounting in this game. Jacob is pleased. For anyone who has seen the FE4 videos, or I guess the FE5 video, that was a big thing for him.
Yeah, dismounting... Oh boy. Sorry, I'm having Vietnam flashbacks about dismounting.
It's fine.
Okay.
So, we talked about the class system, we talked about supports.
This is the first Fire Emblem game with multiplayer, I guess we could say that.
Oh yeah, it is. There's the Link Arena.
Yeah, the only portable game that doesn't have multiplayer, I believe, 3 houses.
Does I don't think FE7 is multiplayer, does it?
It does. It has the same multiplayer as this game.
Oh yeah, wait. All it doesn't have is it doesn't have the trials. What do they call that? I just remember creature campaign, but that's FBA.
Trial maps.
Trial maps. Thank you. It doesn't have the trial map exclusive characters.
Yeah, this is the first Fire Emblem game to also have a sort of post game as well.
Yeah, because if you play through this game multiple times, then in the multiplayer modes, you can unlock some of the characters that were NPCs. You can play as Zephiel. You can play as Narshan.
I don't believe you can use them in multiplayer. I think you can only use them in trial maps.
Okay. Well, in that case, I guess it's more similar to Sacred Stone, so it makes sense.
Yeah.
The point is you can unlock these characters for use after the game.
Yeah, there's a couple, I think 8 maps, I believe it was, in total.
Might need to look it up.
But yeah, there's a bunch of maps that you can unlock that don't have any story attached to them that are available to play after the game has ended. And these are kind of super maps, as it were, that you can just kind of fuck around in. And you can use characters that you couldn't control otherwise in the story in these games. The most significant are probably Zephiel. You can control Zephiel in these trial maps. And another one is Princess Guinevere. And Princess Guinevere is significant because in this game, she's a sage that breaks the rules of the sage class.
Explain.
You know sages use anima magic, right?
Yeah.
Well, no. She's a sage that uses anima magic instead.
Alright, so yeah, I checked there are 9 trial maps.
Mm-hmm.
And the different characters you can unlock are Narshan, Gal, Hector, Brunya, Ellawood, Murdoch, Zephiel, and Guinevere, in that order.
What's also interesting about this game is that Hector's a general that prefers axes, and Ellawood is a paladin that prefers swords, and both of these would sort of become important in FE7. The Night Lord class that Ellawood uses in FE7 is actually a modified version of Paladin, which is a reference to the fact that he's a paladin in this game. And Hector's Great Lord class is a modified version of General, which is also a reference to how he becomes a general in this game.
But he knows how to use swords.
I think generals can use swords in this game.
Can they? I don't think so.
I'm pretty sure they can use the entire fucking weapon triangle.
No, because paladins can use the weapon triangle, but
yeah,
I'm pretty sure generals
I'm pretty sure generals can too.
Yeah, Douglas can only use lances and axes.
They can use swords and sacred stones, though. That's probably...
Yeah, that's probably what you're thinking of. Once again, Sacred Stones has the best class system on the GBA games.
This is the first game to have the Great Lord class. And the Great Lord class would go on, starting with Sacred Stones, to basically be the primary promotion of all the lords going forward.
Yeah, because Ephraim became a Great Lord.
Yeah, Roy becomes a Great Lord. Erica and Ephraim become a Great Lord.
Prom and Lucina
become a Great Lord. Rowan and
Dimitri
and Royers become a Great Lord.
Dimitri's a Great Lord too, isn't he?
Yeah, that's the only Lord class that actually comes from prior games too.
Barbarossa.
Yeah, Barbarossa is completely unique in Emperor, wasn't it? Games.
Oh, yeah.
But
Emperor wasn't a Lord class, but...
And this game introduced it with Roy, so I would say that's pretty significant.
And also, one thing that's notable about Roy is that he is utterly useless for the first 75% of the game. And then he promotes, and he's broken.
No, you can't just kill everyone. You're supposed to be a terrible lord. Binding Blade go Num.
Yeah, this is a game that one thing I constantly complain about, I won't go into too much detail on it, is that Roy one-shots the final boss.
He one-shots fucking everything. What are you talking about?
I do, but you think at least the final boss would take 2 hits.
Yeah, the Binding Blade kind of destroys everything. Great Lord in general destroys everything. And if you know what you're doing, you can make the Great Lord in this game have 15 movement.
Yeah,
or wait,
you talked me into doing that.
Actually?
I need to look at his caps.
But yeah, Roy can end up running Wyvern Lords in this game. Outrunning Wyvern Lords. I bet Ephraim that.
Yeah. Pretty much you can just buy a whole bunch of boots in one of the secret shops. They don't put a limit on it. And then Roy can run everywhere.
And that combined with the Binding Blade, pretty much you just won the game at that point.
Yep, pretty much.
Also, I want to say the map theme for whenever you're in those last few chapters is amazing.
Yes, like actually, that's one thing we did talk about. Most of the music in this game just slaps.
Yeah, this is where iconic Fire Emblem music kind of started for me. Although Jugdral had a lot of good stuff, and most
Yeah,
of the
not
arcade
to
music
say
I
anything
like
bad
actually
about
does
Yugdral.
Yeah, the interesting thing
but
is that most of the arcade music I really like comes from the remakes.
Yeah, I think that's just the upgrade from the SNES sound card to the GBA sound card. Because just looking at this music, there's obviously the FE theme, Beneath the New Lights, Beyond the Sky, Winning Road, Land of Dragons, In the Name of Burn.
Dark Priestess, that theme.
Yes. Shaman in the Dark.
Yeah, there's the Last Dragon is interesting because you actually pay attention to the remix as the final boss theme, Campaign of Fire 7. You're trying to figure out if that's true now, aren't you?
Maybe.
Yeah, Campaign of Fire is a remix of The Last Dragon.
That's pretty cool, actually.
Mm-hmm. Because fire dragons.
I feel like we've been wasting a lot of time in this recording.
Yeah, we're just trying to figure out what to fucking talk because there's a lot
to talk about for this game.
There's a lot.
Especially if you... I know a lot of people have played FE7 and love that game. If you love FE7, play FE6.
Yeah.
Trust me on this.
FE7 gives a lot of context to this game. I actually feel like this game is better because FE7 exists, which is interesting.
I can't say because I only played FE6 after playing 7.
Yeah, like a lot of the minor really detailed backstories and motives thanks to FE7.
Yeah, I think it could honestly go either way.
Like Hector himself is a really good example.
Yeah.
And so is Zephiel.
Yeah, or even, like, just going and getting all those extra weapons in FE6 after learning more about some of those characters in FE7.
Mm-hmm.
Like, getting 4-Blaze in FE6 means nothing. When you get it after you play FE7, that's a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot, especially because canonically Lilina's supposed to use it. And, you know, the whole prophecy thing with Roy and Lilina.
Also, This is the first game where you can sleep with your own teacher.
Oh, God.
Am I wrong?
You're not wrong, okay? It's just... It's not canon, okay?
Yeah,
it's like Nana marrying her cousin in FE4. It's not canon, so we don't have to talk about it.
Like, it's not wrong in one way, but it's wrong in many others.
Yeah, it's not canon. So, using that logic, we don't have to acknowledge it, just like because it's not canon, Intelligence doesn't have to acknowledge that Nana can marry her own cousin, Ares, in Fire Emblem. We covered multiplayer, right? Or should I cover it? Basically, multiplayer in this game, it's the same in all the GBA games after this, so consider this the review of all the GBA Fire Emblem multiplayers. Can we agree that?
Yep.
Basically, the GBA Fire Emblem, what you do is you choose 4 units from your save file, and you can pit them against 4 units of up to 4 other players. You put them in an arena-style match against each other until only 1 unit is left standing. Or 1 team. You can have Fog of enabled to make it so that you don't know who you're going to fight against the first time you select that, to add an element of chance to it. And you can use any weapon that character can use from the main game. I don't believe you can use trial map characters, or you cannot use creature campaign characters in FE8.
And you cannot use non-existent characters in FE7. Still salty.
Let's just move on.
So the last big thing I can think of talking about is who's your favorite character?
Fuck, there's so many to choose from. I really like Elfin, actually.
Yeah, he's up there for me. I voted him for
especially
the best
once I realized that Elfin's actually blind.
Well, not completely blind, but sometimes blind. Partially blind, I guess. Actually, I wonder if his being blind is a reference to Homer. because Homer was famously blind.
And he's a bard.
Yep.
Um,
That's cool.
and his epithet, and Elfin's epithet is one who has true sight. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that personally, my favorite character from this game is the most memorable Fire Emblem character of all time, OJ.
OJ.
I'm joking. I don't even know if that's how you pronounce his name.
Ogier.
Yeah, that guy.
Yeah, that.
I think it's supposed to be pronounced similar to OJ.
I believe I pronounce him Ogier, or Ogier.
I don't know. Point is, I always forget he exists.
I like Sophia, even though she's really difficult to get going correctly. I like Lilina. I end up liking Roy a lot, actually.
I will say that Bartray is one of the most fun characters in Fire Emblem.
Yeah, Bartray is a really good character. I actually prefer FE6 Bartray to FE7 Bartray, especially after all.
By far, but at the same time, I think FE7 I prefer FE6 Bartray, but you can clearly see they're the exact same guy. It's just that one of them's a dad.
FE6 Bartray, when you have the context of FE7, you see he goes through a lot of character development, actually.
Yeah, but you can definitely... Well, actually, it's weird that comparing Bartray of all people to Zephiel, but in that same way, you can see how they became exactly the person they are.
Yeah, and another character that gets the treatment is Carol, and Carol's a much more extreme.
Oh, yes. I was going to bring him up. He is probably my favorite character in all of Elebe.
Yeah, which is interesting because Carol is the only character who survived completely intact from the original Dark Priestess narrative.
Melody is one of the best Wyvern riders in the series, at least character-wise.
Yeah, Melody is an interesting take on Minerva. I like Guinevere a lot, actually. She's up there with Nina as one of my favorites. Guinevere is just a character that I can't help but feel really, really bad for. But also, there's just a lot to unpack with Guinevere. That's a lot of it is spoilers.
Yeah. And actually, I think a lot of this game as well isn't just singular people, but groups of people. The back and forth between Yoder and Saul and Dorothy are all great characters.
Also, I can't believe I didn't mention her. There's a lot of stuff I forget to mention in these reviews, so I'm trying to think of everything. Yeah. Neem. I fucking love Neem.
Oh yeah, and especially Neem and Yoder supports.
Yeah, especially whenever you realize that Neem isn't really a bad person, she's just an asshole. Is whenever you realize that. Really great character for me.
If you want to compare Neem supports with Hugh, with Ray, and with Yoder, just get those three supports. And actually, her face support's really good too.
Yeah, her face support is what I think best instances of writing this entire game, and sort of moral dilemma.
I would totally believe it.
Yeah, and Neem finds herself in such an interesting moral dilemma, and ends up challenging her humanity's beliefs on dragons. It's a really great fucking support, honestly.
It really is.
And especially the nuance of the writing between those two wildly different characters.
Yeah. I will say he's not a very interesting character, but design-wise, I love Garrett. Admittedly, I didn't actually get any of his supports, but...
Diane's another character I kind of like, for similar reasons as Neem.
Yeah, and... he gets super meta. If you haven't seen his Yoder supports, go check it out. Yoder just has a lot of great supports. He is low-key one of the best characters in this game.
Character-wise.
Yes.
He is not really he's not really that great of a bishop, honestly.
He's very similar to Renyol in that way.
Alright, yeah. Okay.
He shows up late game. He's not a great bishop, but he's got, every support.
I have no defense for this, except no one can be as bad statistically as Renyalt.
Admittedly, the fact that Renyalt's stats are so bad is one of the best parts of his character.
Yeah.
It's that attention to detail.
Yeah, he has mercenary stats.
Which is very important.
But also really bad on a bishop.
Because he doesn't have magic.
Yeah.
His strength, though. If you could reclass in this game, he'd be great. But you can't. I will say it also has the most interesting board chord pairing, I think, with your Lot and Wade.
I guess that's fair to say. I also think this is one of the better dancers in the series, character-wise, with Elfin.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Like, FE6 and FE7 have some of the best refreshers in the series, character-wise.
Yeah, Tellius probably has some of the best with its 3 refreshers.
I guess that, yeah, the Herons.
Yeah, you'll probably see them soon since you're going through FE. But yeah, Tellius really does have some of the best characters with its refreshers.
We've mentioned almost every character in this game. And, like, we still haven't gotten to people like Marcus.
Marcus is one of the better Jakens, would you say?
Yeah, in FE7 he's one of the best gameplay-wise, although he isn't, Seth or Titania. But he's pretty up there. And then FE7, like, his need to pass on the torch leads to some really great supports with both the Christmas Calves, with Wolt, with Lelina, with Roy. Pretty good Christmas Calves in this game, too. I wouldn't put them top tier, but Lance and Alan are both great guys. I enjoy them.
Yeah, they're kind of infamous for the Lance and Alan themselves being a really bad example of this early support system, though.
Yeah, fair.
Hey, Lance, what are you doing? Oh, I'm practicing. Lance says, what are you doing? Oh, I'm having practice with my sword. What are you doing? Oh, I'm just doing laps with my horses. Hey, that was a great talk. See, support obtained. It's probably the weakest support in this game.
Yeah, anything that, like, the few good things that come out of their supports are brought up better in other supports.
Yeah, the Christmas Cats having terrible supports with each other is a fucking irony. Yeah, I feel like most people get their support with each other and then just write them.
Yeah, honestly, that's kind of fair.
Yeah, I think that's what ends up happening. This game is just one of those games that is a lot better. This kind of starts the trend of Fire Emblem stories not really having the full depth unless you get the support conversations. But there's both a pro and a con of this series.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of depth in these support conversations. It's just, realistically, you're not going to get all of it in one playthrough, or even, 3 playthroughs. Is there anything else we want to cover before moving on to the whole Maid of Dark thing?
I think we've covered everything. At this point, there is nothing else that we could talk about.
We can talk about the manga. Because the manga is probably worth mentioning.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning. We've mentioned it. Let's move on.
I guess we should explain the manga, because neither of us have read it completely. But before this game came out, and up until this game's release, this is kind of going with the idea of FE6 having a really fucking weird lead up to its development cycle, and the whole cycle for FE6 just really weird in general. There was a manga that was overseen by, and it was intended to be a canonical prelude to FE6. And then later on, the manga, it kind of splits off and becomes its own story, which kind of results in a split timeline situation. It's complicated. Basically, parts of this manga happen before the game, and parts of this manga are their own story separate from this game. It's kind of like a timeline split, anyways. Intelligent Systems oversaw the official manga for FE6 that was starring different characters and made you take before this game. And eventually, an alternate version of this game. Shonen Jump.
Yeah, it just kind of went off the edge halfway through and became its own thing.
Yeah.
But interestingly, weapons named after the 3 the main characters.
Oh, they aren't named after them. They're literally the same weapon. Al's sword is the titular sword of the manga.
But point is that there are references to this non-canonical manga within the game.
It is canonical. Oh, that's the thing.
It's partially canonical.
It's partly the whole thing is canon because of how the fucking timeline. But not canon to this game, except for 3 chapters, I think. Or it could be 3 volumes. I'm not sure.
I don't know.
But yeah, and also all the backstory in the manga is Elebe as a whole.
Yeah, I will say that actually we talk about why can't I remember names right now?
Hart Moot.
Thank you. Yes, we talk about Hart Moot as an FE6 main, but honestly, he's more important in Hasha no Tsurugi, which is the manga, than he is in FE6, and that's kind of saying something.
He's extremely important in the manga. He's extremely important in FE6.
But if anyone who's read the manga will kind of know where we're going with that. Spoilery stuff again.
It does have its own Lord character, who has only ever appeared since this game in Cypher.
Al.
Yeah, Al. There's not really much to go into the manga. I can't really review the manga because I haven't really... the main thing to know about the manga is it's made to be an official, canonical supplement to FE6 as a prelude to it. Then it kind of splintered off later into its own thing. But FE6 is still written to sort of acknowledge those first couple of chapters that are a prelude and kind of keep them official. And it has Al's sword and Gaunt's lance and all that to reference the fact that yes, the events of the first couple of chapters of the manga did happen in this game. Now we can talk about the rest of this weird development.
Okay, so we talked a long time ago, probably an hour ago at this point. Let's see, how far in the recording are we? Yeah, an hour 10. We talked about how the Fire Emblem series completely skipped the 64, but that wasn't the original intention.
Yeah, we talked about this in the FE5 video too.
You should really go watch the Thracia video if you haven't.
And we talked about this in the FE5 video. FE5 and 6 were kind of a transition for Fire Emblem, but
very much so. Pretty much Nintendo was really pushing IS to get a Fire Emblem game on the 64, even though that really wasn't what Kaga wanted. But they ended up creating the concept for the game called Dark Priestess.
And we actually do have a localized title for the subtitle.
Because of the appearance of Athun in Heroes.
Idun. Idun is a major character in Binding Blade, and she is actually known as the Priestess. So we actually do know that Idun was also going to have a major role in Dark Priestess, obviously. She has the same epithet that game had. What's interesting about Dark Priestess itself is that it didn't just splinter off into Binding Blade, it also kind of somewhat splintered off into some of the concepts we would see in Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn later.
Yeah, especially because the version of Roy that existed in that game, who does look very similar to the Roy that we have in FE6, was named Ike.
Yeah.
So very much split
a lot of concepts, both mechanical and story, pop up in Tellius later.
And don't we have a full story idea of what it was going to be? A full synopsis somewhere?
We don't. We only have snippets of what it would have been. We just know that some of this game's concepts were worked into Tellius' plot, and some of this game's concepts worked into Elbe's overall plot. Or Leave's overall plot. We do know that Carol would have been exactly the same in Maiden of Darkness, for example. We know Roy and Ike were originally the same character in this game, and it was originally on the N64. This game ended up suffering the fate a couple of other late N64 titles suffered, though.
But pretty much what happened was after Kaga decided he didn't want to work Nintendo anymore and tried to take Fire Emblem away from them and failed.
Miserably.
He went off
because you don't just put Nintendo properties on the PlayStation. I think everyone knows.
Yeah, you barely even put Nintendo properties on YouTube. Let alone the PlayStation.
I'm pretty sure Miyamoto just literally drove Kaga. I'm pretty sure Kaga is in a bunker somewhere at this point. Thinking that the Japanese government is conspiring upon.
But pretty much, he went off on his own to make Tearing Saga. And then with him gone, FE64 kind of collapsed in on itself.
It didn't collapse in on itself because Kaga left, though. It kind of collapsed in on itself because the disk drive failed.
That's also true. But pretty much
Kaga pretty much didn't matter to development after a certain point, actually.
I guess he was already kind of falling out of favor during Thracia, and he didn't even want to do FE64.
So what ended up happening was FE64 is actually going to be a very expansive game, which is why we have enough content that eventually became not only Elite, but also Tellius. Magville factored in nowhere into this, essentially. Magville is pretty much written by the seat of their pants in regards to this. It was going to be an extremely expansive game for the drive, but because the disc drive failed so miserably, this game never came into fruition, and this suffered the same fate that a couple of other disc drive games suffered. Mother 3 is perhaps the most famous example. It was originally going to be a drive, then it got moved to the Gameboy Advance, but another example is also Golden Sun, which was initially going to be a Nintendo 64 disc drive game, But Nintendo pushed for it to become a Game Boy Advance launch title instead, and the stress of this development shift for Golden Sun was so intense that they ended up having to split Golden Sun into 2 games on the Game Boy Advance just to make the launch title deadline. So what happened after the N64 incarnation of this collapse? They decided to move it over to the Game Boy Advance. This game went through a lot of changes going to the Game Boy Advance. A lot. Roy didn't even have a consistent design up until, like, what was it, 6 months before this game came out? Yeah, an interesting thing is because of Binding Blade's development, they actually wanted Roy in Smash Bros. Instead of Leif because they wanted to promote the upcoming game. This makes for Roy the first officially promotional character in Smash Bros. We would later see this with, like, in All Smash Ultimate, like how Luigi has the Poltergust GOO, Joker has most of his Persona 5 Royale moveset. A lot of the promotional characters in Ultimate, the first one was Roy in Melee. Anything else we want to talk about?
No, I think I'm good.
Okay.
So as a whole, it's a good game. It's got its issues, but in general, it's a thoroughly enjoyable experience, and it leads very well into the next game in the series.
I would say the next game in the series leads very well into this game, by contrast.
I would say we're both right. And with that, let's call it, I guess.
Okay.
Thank you guys for watching.
But we didn't even read this game.
Oh yeah, you're right. I completely forgot. The entire point of this was a tier list. I give this a solid B.
I give it an A.
So this would lead out to probably B plus, A minus, somewhere in there. I'll put it wherever it seems more balanced. You'll see it on screen now.
Okay.
And with that, we will see you guys next time.
All right.